What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Turn the Jets podcast. I'm your host, Will Parkinson, at WillPod11 on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, all 32 pod TOJ Talks. First day of training camp in the books. The Jets are officially not only back, but back on the practice field. Nobody got hurt day one. The vibes were good. Garrett and Sauce extended. Mason Taylor in camp, no issues there. So obviously a lot of really positive kind of vibes around the Jets. Business as usual, everyone reporting yesterday. Going to hop on here, talk 10, 11 minutes just on kind of 53-man roster predictions, some things to watch for in camp. We've talked a lot about different position battles over the last couple of weeks, players to watch, potential breakout guys. So want to kind of reiterate that. And then we'll be back later in the week, with some more training camp recap and talking about kind of how things are starting to unfold. Not just, kind of hypotheticals and different things like that, but actually, how things are looking on the field. So again, reminder, live show tickets, August 23rd. They are selling very fast. We have steadily every single day we're selling them, a good amount of tickets. So make sure you get one so you're actually able to show up. Bunch of special guests, a lot of pods on the feed. Connor and Joe, myself and Zach Rosenblatt. I know Meeks and PK debuted their show. Dan had a really good episode last week, so a ton there. But I want to kind of talk initially, 53-man roster predictions, and I think everyone's kind of viewed this roster. I would say 40-ish spots or generally kind of. You're going to see the same 40 guys on pretty much everybody's projection, right? Obviously, your Garrett's, your Sauce, Fields, Tyrod, whatever it may be. Now, I'm going to go through position by position, kind of where I went with. Again, there's a good chance I'm not going to be right about half these, but we'll start quarterback. I think the Jets only keep two quarterbacks. I would be pretty surprised if they go the 3 quarterback route. Just in today's NFL and the way their roster is structured, I don't know how that's going to happen. Adrian Martinez isn't a guy who's going to be a hot topic. Brady Cook, one of those guys makes it as a third quarterback. They'll likely be, push through waivers, go to the practice squad, and the Jets will activate them as their, emergency quarterback, for week 1. But I wouldn't make too much of it. I saw some people, hey, what about quarterback 3? I would be surprised. The Jets are usually a 2 quarterback roster, even in the Rodgers era and things like that. Running back, I went, 4 guys making the team. I think this is one of the best rooms on the roster. I think everyone's pretty much in alignment there with the roster as a whole. I think maybe there's some disagreement of who that 4th back may be. There's a lot of Donovan Edwards fans, and I think a lot of college football fans, again, naturally are going to be big fans of the player. Obviously, a couple of years ago was an awesome back, and they won the national championship and the whole 9 yards. Obviously was not the same player the last 24 months, specifically last 12 months, post-injury. So we'll see. I'm sure he has a shot. I think there's an outside chance if he can catch the ball well at the backfield, be good in protection, different things like that. Of course, there's always a chance for someone like that to make the roster. And the Jets need playmakers, and if he's going to be able to, he showcases he can return back to prime Donovan Edwards, sure. That said, I went Hall, Allen, Davis. Those 3 guys are a lock. I think Connor and Joe talked about it. Isaiah Davis might be the most underrated player in this team. I thought he was really good last year, and during camp, and he was getting a lot of reps. And I was like, oh, interesting. Like, didn't really foresee him being a guy getting reps with the ones coming into training camp, and he slowly kind of came along, and I thought he was really good, especially when Breece Hall was kind of out, and and in and out, and with the injuries and stuff like that. I thought he was really effective. Towards the back half of the year, the Dolphins game kind of stands out to me. I went Kenny and Nwanu as the 4th back. Now, Kenny had some nice moments by all accounts during OTAs and in the camp. I was not in person to see that. When I get to camp this summer, I'll a couple times I'll kind of reiterate to see if that was truly the case. But the point being, I think he can potentially be sufficient enough as the 4th back to be able to make the team because he's the best kick returner by and large on this roster, and it's not particularly close. He obviously brought one back to the house last year. I think he probably could have brought more back if he didn't end up getting hurt right away. I believe 3 or 4 in his career. He's just a guy that I think provides an explosive dynamic to this special teams unit, and I think that he's a guy they end up keeping. I think he shows enough in the preseason and during camp, especially in his ability to maybe potentially catch punts. If he's just a fair catch guy. Xavier Gipson, we'll get into it. Muffed the punt already today. This is probably the most controversial position I did on the team. I went Garrett Wilson, obviously, Josh Reynolds, Allen Lazard, Tyler Johnson, Arian Smith. Those five, you know, I think are basically locks unless the Jets move off Lazard. Johnson has a terrible camp. I don't know. I would be surprised that at this point anything could happen with Lazard, right? Like, I don't know. Pittsburgh maybe just goes, hey, we really want him, and Rodgers pushes for it. I think the Jets also at this point kind of need him, and until someone overtakes that spot, and he's taken enough of a pay cut, it's a stomachable. It's a stomachable cap hit. Even though, again, I get it. Lazard had a drop today already. Like, it is what it is. Ideally, he's not playing a ton of reps. Now, I guess the two guys I had making it, Brandon Smith and Jamal Pritchett, is probably the most controversial of the guys that I have on this 53. So, from a Smith perspective, 6'2", kid from receiver out of Iowa, was with the Jets at the end of last year. Had a really nice spring by all accounts. I could see him having a really nice summer. And that's really that. Like, I just can, the Jets are desperate at receiver at that bottom half of the roster. He's a bigger guy. Could he be could he have a summer? Jason Brownlee had that type of summer. Could see him producing, a bunch in the preseason, and then the Jets end up holding on to him. And, he plays specials as a gunner and different things like that. And then lastly, I went with Pritchett, Senior Bowl guy, extremely fast, one of the fastest guys on the roster. Now, I think he's going to need to show he can catch kicks, not just catch punts. So, it's kind of just one of those things where who between Gibson and Pritchett shows enough at both receiver and on punt return and the ability to catch kicks to make this team. And I just think Pritchett's is a better athlete, and I think he'll end up winning that job. So that's kind of what I went there. And again with Smith, I think he outplays a Corley. I think he outplays Gibson purely from a receiver standpoint, and then ends up being able to stick there. So Irv Charles, I think, is a guy who goes on IR. I mean, it gets hurt. He got hurt week 15 last year. I would be pretty surprised if he's a guy that is ready at all by week 8. Maybe we'll see there. Offensive line: Fashanu, Simpson, Tippmann, Veritucker, Membu. I went Chukwueze for. I think he's clearly tackle 3, swing tackle. He's an early signing in free agency. I don't think that's by mistake. I went Max Mitchell as a second or the fourth tackle, fourth guard. Just think he has better positional flexibility than Carter Warren. Could see him being a guy that just kind of sticks on the roster. Josh Myers obviously is kind of the interior offensive line number 1 backup. And then Xavier Newman as that kind of, again, guard center flexibility. Good guy in the locker room, 9th, 10th offensive lineman there. Switching over to the defense, it's the obvious ones: Nandi, Cowart, Taylor, Williams. I don't have Tufele on here. There's a good shout to be made that Jay Tufele is going to make this team. Asking, kind of figure out where he kind of fits in. There would make some sense that he could be a guy who could possibly make this team. The Jets need more fatties, as Joe Caproso always likes to say. So, yeah, I think that's the one. Do they keep 5, D tackles, 5 edges? Do they go 6 and 4? I have them going 6 edges, 4 defensive tackles, partially because I think guys like Jermaine Clemens, can kind of kick inside from time to time on certain personnel groupings, and kind of provide some extra depth there. Edge, McDonald, Johnson, Clemens. I'll say this about Clemens, and I've said this a million times. There's a chance that Clemens in camp is terrible, and the Jets cut him. There's also a chance everyone around Michael Clemens is also very bad, and they have no choice but to play him. Michael Clemens in a edge 3, edge 3.5, really, you'd hope he's your 4th edge, but edge 4, special teams guy, 10 reps a game, sparing guys, is a fine player. He's like a $2.5, $3 million player. The Jets were really good in 2022, and they had Clemens, and he wasn't as much of a nuisance. I'm not advocating to have him on the team. I'm just telling you that's what the thinking is going to be. That said, if we get into week 3 of camp, Jermaine doesn't look close to ready, and Michael Clemens is a starter, and he's playing 85 reps a game, it's going to be a huge problem, point blank. So does that mean Jadeveon Clowney? Does that mean Matt Judon? Does that mean Tyler Barron, Rashad Weaver, Jamin Davis need to step up. Yeah, it does. It means these guys who might be situational pass rushers need to figure it out. Now it's on the Jets, Eric Washington, Aaron Glenn, Steve Wilkes to develop some of these guys, get the best out of Clemens and people like that. So no, I don't think he's getting cut. And just the reality of it, I'm not advocating for it. I'm just telling you that's more likely the reality than not. I had Tyler Barron making it. Again, this regime traded up for him. Not that it really means anything on day 3, but end of the day, I would have a hard time believing they're going to cut him. I'm very curious to see what he looks like in person since I last saw him, because his roster weight is listed way heavier than I have ever seen him. So I don't know if the Jets purposely had him bulk. I don't know what's going on there. I'm excited to see what it kind of looks like, because I'm not saying he's like this awesome prospect, but he had some potential to a lot of people. And hey, maybe he goes and grabs a roster spot by by the scruff of the neck, whatever the stupid saying may be. I had Braden McGregor making it over a guy like Eric Watts. To me, that's a toss-up. I think one of those guys makes it. I had Jamin Davis as this 6th edge rusher, 5th linebacker, special teams guy, former first-round pick, really good athlete. He's played more edge these days, trying to just get the best out of him. I could see him being that, hey, random sub-package blitzing guy, and oh, that's weird. Jamin Davis, I forgot he was still in the league. He has 3.5 sacks this year for the Jets in a small role. I could see that happening, and maybe being a backup to Quincy in terms of that blitzing backer role, as Joe and Connor mentioned. In terms of linebacker, pretty straightforward here. I think if you view Jamin Davis as a linebacker, maybe he makes a spot over Barnes. This group's really good at the top, right? Sherwood, Quincy Williams. You go to Kiko, pretty solid, classic 3rd linebacker, special teamer, heavy package, goal line, short yardage guy, bigger backer. Makes a ton of sense. I have Zaire Barnes making it as of now. Again, this roster is based on who's on the Jets at the moment, not with future transactions in mind. Again, I would add another backer. I'd add a defensive lineman, and I'd add a receiver. That said, I'm not there, Muji and Aaron Glenn, so I can't tell them what to do. Although, if you're listening, I feel like you could get better there at those spots, and you have the money to do it. But regardless, I have Barnes just being a classic special teamer. Year 3, maybe the light switch comes on a little bit for him. Corner room, Sauce, Brandon Stevens, Michael Carter, likely the day 1 opening starters. If it's not, it's probably Azaria Thomas, who I have next. Jarek Bernard Converse, friend of the pod. It's a good episode, by the way, if you want to hear him talk a little bit about Garrett and Sauce and Glenn, college landscape, etc. That's back up on the feed from last weekend, so make sure you check that out. But JBC, corner safety flexibility, year 4 now for him. Again, is a guy who had a really strong summer last year, and I think has showed a lot, showed a lot of himself in a good way to kind of, continue his development there. And then lastly, I have Quantez Stiggers. I think the Jets keep a bunch of corners. I just think for depth purposes, I think JBC, Stiggers both have potential to play corner and safety. Same with Michael Carter to an extent, Brandon Stevens to an extent, a lot of versatile, players in that room. And then I have Chris Boyd making the team. Now, if you told me, Kenny, Pritchett, and Boyd all make it, I wouldn't be shocked. That's what I have here. If you told me only 1 or 2 of those guys make it just because, hey, 3 core teamers at the end of the day. That said, the way the Jets roster is kind of constructed, because I'm only keeping 3 tight ends, I didn't have Andrew Beck making it. I could see him making it again. I just think the Jets maybe prioritize an extra receiver that can return, stuff like that, over him. But, if you told me Beck over Pritchett, Beck over Boyd, whatever it may be, with Eric Charles out, Boyd's going to be your number 1 gunner. Can Stiggers and Boyd be your gunners? JBC, Stiggers, maybe Brandon Smith be your kind of, punt guys. We'll see. Last 2 ones here, Cisco, Moore, Adams, and Oliver making it. Oliver, to me, and Adams are probably fighting for safety 3 / backup nickel. But we'll see there. And then I went Hennessy, Davis, McNamara. Listen, guys, kicker and punter is anybody's guess at this point. Yes, I've seen both guys. I watched them in college. I asked people that scouted them in college about them. At the end of the day, no one fucking knows until these guys start kicking in games, right? So that's the 53-man there. Just going over practice today real quick before we wrap here. Fields had some nice throws. Fields held the ball a little too long. We're going to get a lot of that during camp. I wouldn't overly freak out about it. Fields is always processing's always been his number one issue. I don't expect that to change overnight. Now throughout camp, you like to see it get better and better as the practices get more and more intense. The playbook is already in, but like start really dumping stuff during the playbook. You'd like to see it get faster and faster. Is he ever going to be processing of Rodgers and Breeze and Peyton? I don't think so. But again, throughout the spring got better. From a processing perspective, you like to see that continue. Much bigger plays. He's not going to play football in a 7-yard box like Aaron Rodgers. Gary Wilson was awesome today, by all accounts. Brandon Stevens was good, although he got mossed. And again, Brandon Stevens is what makes him so frustrating, and I think it's going to frustrate Jets fans, is he's a really good cover corner. He doesn't get beat often. Doesn't make a lot of plays on the football, and guys make plays over him. So it's like he does everything right until the football is in the air. And it is what it is. So other than that, Will McDonald had some pressures. The Jets sent Brandon Stevens on a blitz and was able to get a bat down, so that was good to see. Malachi Corley had a drop. Aaron Smith apparently had a nice day. Corley and Lazard had drops, and water is wet and the grass is green. Other than that, the Jets will be back on the field tomorrow. Again, live show tickets, amongst a million other things. There's a lot of merch in the Badlands, universe and different things like that. So appreciate everyone for listening. I'll be back on the feed either tomorrow or Saturday. Appreciate it for listening. We'll talk to you guys soon.